a worldwide fellowship of Christians in action. Dale Evans was an American actress, singer, songwriter, and author.
Dale Evans was known to the world as America's sweetheart of the West, the smiling cowgirl. But behind the polished Hollywood image was a woman carrying secrets, heartbreak, and scars the cameras never showed. Join us as we uncover the hidden truth about Dale Evans' life and the painful secrets she carried until the very end. The girl who would become Dale Evans. Frances Octavia Smith, who the world would one day know as Dale Evans, was born on October 31, 1912, in the small town of Uvalde, Texas. Her beginnings were not glamorous. She did not grow up surrounded by lights, applause, or comfort. Instead, her childhood was unsettled and marked by a deep absence of security. Her parents' marriage was strained, and Frances often felt that she did not have the steady foundation most children rely on. She was moved between different homes, sometimes staying with relatives, and she grew up without the kind of constant love and reassurance that helps a young girl feel safe. This early instability shaped her deeply. She learned early on that life could change quickly, and that the people who were supposed to provide stability could also be distant or unreliable. Eventually, Frances ended up in Osceola, Arkansas, under the care of her uncle, Dr. L.D. Massey. Dr. Massey was a respected physician in the community, and his home gave her a measure of stability that she had not experienced before. She had a roof over her head, regular meals, and the appearance of security. But it was a different kind of home than the one she longed for. While her uncle provided structure, there was little in the way of warmth or emotional connection. For Frances, the house was orderly, but it was not filled with the affection that a young girl so desperately needs. This lack of closeness left her feeling unseen and lonely, even in a household where her physical needs were met. That hunger for love and belonging pushed her into decisions that would shape her life forever. At just 14 years old, she made a choice that shocked those around her. Seeking stability in a place where she might finally feel wanted, she eloped with a man named Thomas F. Fox. It was not unusual in those days for young women to marry early, but Frances was still very much a child. She was hopeful, perhaps too trusting, and she wanted desperately to build the family she had never really had. Within a short time, she became pregnant, and by the time she was only 15 years old, she gave birth to her first and only biological son, Thomas F. Fox, Jr. For a brief moment, it may have seemed like the start of a new chapter. Frances was a wife and a mother, and she might have believed she had finally found the foundation she had been missing since her own childhood. But reality was far harsher than the dream. Within a year of their marriage, Thomas Fox abandoned her. He left her with a baby to raise and no support. At an age when most girls were still in school, Frances found herself living alone in Memphis, Tennessee, responsible for a newborn child and forced to face the adult world without help. It was an almost impossible situation. Society in the 1920s did not look kindly on young single mothers. There were few resources available, little compassion, and almost no opportunities for a girl her age to make a living while also raising a child. Yet Frances refused to give up. Instead of breaking under the weight of her circumstances, she leaned on a gift she had carried with her since childhood: music. Frances had a natural talent for singing and for playing the piano. In Memphis, she began to seek out work in local radio stations, performing live on the air. The pay was small and the hours were long, but these jobs gave her a way to provide for her son. Her voice, smooth and filled with emotion, soon caught the attention of listeners. She was no longer just a struggling young mother. She was beginning to be seen as a performer with real potential. Music became her survival tool. It was how she paid her bills, how she kept her son fed, and how she began to carve out an identity for herself outside of the shadows of abandonment and instability. Those early years were hard, filled with responsibility that most girls her age could not imagine. But they also gave Frances something powerful: the drive to keep moving forward, no matter the obstacles. She had survived a lonely childhood, an abandoned marriage, and the challenge of raising a child alone. Now, through music, she had found the first spark of a future that might finally offer hope. And that spark was about to lead her into a reinvention so complete that the world would soon forget Frances Octavia Smith and fall in love with the name Dale Evans. But the name came with secrets, and those secrets would haunt her for decades. Lies that bought fame. By the time Frances Octavia Smith was beginning to find her footing as a singer, she understood that talent alone wasn't always enough. In the world of entertainment, image mattered as much as ability. It was during her early radio work that she encountered a suggestion that would forever change the course of her life. A radio station manager believed her real name, Frances Smith, was too plain for a performer. He recommended something short, catchy, and memorable, something that would shine on posters and in print. Out of this conversation, the name Dale Evans was born. The transformation was not just about a new name. Dale Evans was a chance to create a new identity. As Frances, she had been a young mother abandoned by her husband, fighting for survival. As Dale, she could be someone fresh, glamorous, and untied to the hardships of her past. The new name allowed her to step into the world of show business with a clean slate. She embraced it wholeheartedly, knowing it might be her only way to leave behind the small-town struggles and heartbreak that had defined her youth. But the reinvention went deeper than just the surface. Dale was coached and encouraged to build an image that audiences would find wholesome and appealing. She was taught how to present herself on stage and how to appear in public. Her clothes, her makeup, and even her smile were carefully polished. The goal was to make her seem both approachable and glamorous, someone fans could admire without suspicion. This transformation was effective. Listeners and viewers believed in the new Dale Evans. They saw her as confident, charming, and unburdened by scandal. Behind that bright image, however, was a young woman still carrying the private pain of her past. The most painful part of this reinvention was the secret she was told to keep about her son. Industry executives insisted that her career would be ruined if people knew she was a teenage mother. They argued that audiences would not accept a young female performer with a child, especially one born out of wedlock. To protect her growing career, Dale was pressured to go along with a false story. Instead of acknowledging Thomas Jr. as her son, she was told to introduce him to the public as her younger brother. This was not just a small lie. It became an ongoing performance that touched nearly every part of her life. Whenever she gave interviews, she had to repeat the false story. When fans sent letters praising her for being such a dedicated big sister, she had to smile and thank them, even though the words cut deep. Publicity photos were carefully arranged to reinforce the narrative, with Dale appearing as the older sister guiding her little brother. In reality, every one of these moments was a reminder of the truth she was forced to bury. The emotional toll of this deception was heavy. Dale loved her son, but she could not show that love openly in the way a mother naturally would. Instead, she had to present herself as detached, as if she were simply a caring sibling. This robbed her of the joy of motherhood in public and created guilt that stayed with her for years. The lie also complicated her private relationships, as people in her inner circle had to play along with the story or risk exposing her. Dale carried this burden quietly, always smiling for the cameras while fighting back the ache inside. Meanwhile, her career was climbing. By the early 1940s, Dale Evans was becoming a recognized name in entertainment. She moved from radio into film, signing with 20th Century Fox. On screen, she was presented as the perfect balance of beauty and wholesomeness. Hollywood began to craft her as a cowgirl type, someone who could sing, ride, and embody the cheerful Western spirit that was becoming popular. Her costumes, often embroidered with Western designs and paired with her trademark radiant smile, became her signature look. Audiences loved her. To them, she seemed like the woman who had it all: talent, charm, and a spotless personal life. Her persona was carefully built to inspire admiration, and it worked. What the public didn't know was that behind this polished image was a woman who had already endured heartbreak, divorce, and a secret that weighed heavily on her conscience. Her fame was rising, but it came at the cost of living a life that was only half true. And when Dale and Roy joined forces, the story only grew more complicated. A trail of broken marriages before Roy. By the time Dale Evans began to find success in radio and film, she was already carrying the scars of a personal life marked by failed relationships. Her first marriage to Thomas F. Fox had left her as a teenage single mother, trying to raise her son on her own. That experience alone could have made her cautious, but instead, Dale kept searching for the stability and love she had missed throughout her childhood. Unfortunately, Her search led her into more relationships that brought disappointment and pain rather than security. Her second marriage was to a man named August Wayne Johns. Not much has been widely recorded about Johns, but what is clear is that their union was short-lived. Dale entered this relationship still young and still vulnerable, looking for someone to give her the sense of belonging she had always craved. But like her first marriage, this one quickly fell apart. It did not give her the family foundation she wanted or the emotional support she needed. Within a short time, it ended in separation. Once again, she was left facing the reality that the stable marriage she dreamed of was not yet within reach. Not long after, Dale entered into her third marriage, this time with Robert Dale Butts, a musician and arranger. This marriage lasted longer than her second, beginning in 1937 and ending in 1946. Butts was not only her husband, but also someone she worked with professionally. He helped arrange her music and supported her as her career grew in radio and eventually film. In some ways, this marriage offered Dale more than the others had. She was no longer just a teenager struggling to survive. She was becoming a professional woman, building a name for herself in Hollywood. Still, the relationship did not give her what she was searching for on a deeper level. While Dale and Butts worked well together in music, their marriage lacked the emotional closeness she longed for. Dale wanted stability and true partnership, but this relationship seemed to function more as a professional arrangement than a strong personal bond. Over time, the distance between them grew, and eventually the marriage ended in divorce. For Dale, it was another wound, another reminder that the happiness she sought in love seemed always out of reach. These broken marriages left her carrying more pain than most people realized. In the public eye, she was becoming known as a glamorous singer and actress. On stage and in magazines, she appeared polished, smiling, and full of life. But behind the scenes, her private life told a much different story. She was a woman who had endured abandonment, disappointment, and loneliness again and again. She was still raising her son under the pretense that he was her younger brother, a lie that haunted her every time she interacted with fans or gave interviews. The truth of her life, multiple marriages, a child born when she was only a teenager, and the constant pressure of secrecy did not fit the image that Hollywood wanted her to portray. In those days, studios carefully controlled the public stories of their stars. A spotless reputation was seen as essential to box office success. Executives at 20th Century Fox worked hard to keep Dale's real past hidden. They did not want fans to know about her son, about her failed marriages, or about the struggles that shaped her. Instead, they sold audiences a version of Dale Evans that was far from the truth. She was presented as Hollywood's sweetheart, a wholesome woman with no scandal attached to her name. It was a role she played well because she had no choice. To survive in the business, she had to protect the image the studio built for her, even when it meant living a double life. Publicly, she was cheerful, graceful, and pure. Privately, she carried guilt, heartache, and the heavy weight of secrets that few people knew. It was during this period of conflicting truths that Dale would meet Roy Rogers, the man who would change her life and career forever. And with Roy, the secrets she had carried for so long finally began to surface. Meeting Roy Rogers. By the mid-1940s, Dale Evans was already carving out a reputation for herself in Hollywood. She was known for her singing, her charm, and her polished image, but she had not yet found the kind of role that would define her career. That moment came in 1944 when she was cast alongside one of the most famous cowboys of the era, Roy Rogers, in the film Home in Oklahoma. Roy was already a major star when the two met on set. He had earned the title King of the Cowboys, and audiences adored him for his wholesome, heroic image. Roy had built his career in Western films, where he was always portrayed as the upright cowboy with strong morals, a kind heart, and a dependable spirit. His public image was carefully shaped, just like Dale's, to show him as a role model both on and off screen. When Dale and Roy began working together, their chemistry was immediate. Both of them were performers who understood what it meant to live under the pressure of Hollywood's demands. Each had a crafted image they had to protect. Dale was the glamorous yet wholesome singer who seemed untouched by scandal. Roy was the family-oriented cowboy who represented goodness and reliability. On screen, their pairing looked natural. Off-screen, they connected as two people who carried hidden struggles beneath the roles they played for the public. Their professional partnership grew quickly. Audiences loved seeing them together, and Hollywood recognized the success of their pairing. But more than that, their bond deepened into something personal. By the time filming was over, it was clear that they had found something special in each other. Dale had gone through 3 failed marriages and years of secrecy about her son. Roy, who had been married before, also understood loss and difficulty. They met not just as rising stars, but as people who carried private pain. That shared understanding became the foundation of their relationship. On New Year's Eve in 1947, Dale Evans and Roy Rogers were married at the Flying L Ranch in Davis, Oklahoma. It was not just a wedding, but a merging of 2 carefully crafted images. For the public, it seemed like the perfect match: America's beloved cowboy and Hollywood's sweet and wholesome cowgirl. Their marriage created a new kind of Western royalty, admired by millions of fans who followed their careers and looked up to them as a model couple. But beyond the glitz of their wedding and the image that was presented to the world, this marriage meant something very different for Dale. For the first time in her life, she felt safe enough to tell the truth about her son. Not long after she and Roy married, Dale made a public confession that had been building inside her for more than a decade. She revealed that Thomas Jr., the boy she had always introduced as her younger brother, was actually her son. This was no small announcement. For years, Dale had carried the pain and guilt of denying her role as a mother. She had hidden the truth to protect her career, but it had haunted her. Now, with Roy by her side, she finally had the courage to say it out loud. Roy's response was compassionate and supportive. He accepted both Dale and her son without hesitation. His reaction gave her the sense of relief she had longed for since her teenage years. But as Dale stepped into her new life with Roy, she soon discovered that building a family under the spotlight came with both joy and devastating loss. A family built on pain. When Dale Evans and Roy Rogers married in 1947, they didn't just create a Hollywood partnership, they built a family that was far larger and more complicated than most people realized. Roy already had 3 children from his first marriage: Cheryl, Linda, and Roy Jr., who was often called Dusty. With Dale's son Thomas Jr., now publicly acknowledged as her child rather than her brother, their household was already full. But Dale and Roy wanted more than just a blended family. They believed deeply in giving children a home, and over the years they opened their arms to 4 more through adoption: Mimi, Dodie, Sandy, and Debbie. From the outside, it looked like the perfect story. The cowboy and cowgirl stars of America raising a big, lively family together. They appeared on magazine covers, gave interviews about parenthood, and shared the image of harmony that fans wanted to see. But inside their home, things were far more complicated. Dale was still carrying the scars of her past, and Roy's strict ways often created tension. On top of that, raising such a large family brought constant challenges. They were determined, though, to create a home filled with love, something Dale had always longed for as a child but rarely received. In 1950, Dale and Roy welcomed a new child, this time their own biological daughter, Robin Elizabeth. Robin was special from the very beginning. She was born with Down syndrome at a time when the condition was poorly understood and often hidden away. In the 1950s, families were frequently pressured to send children with disabilities to institutions rather than raise them at home. The stigma was heavy, and parents often felt isolated and judged. But Dale and Roy refused to follow those expectations. They kept Robin at home, loving her openly and completely. Dale, in particular, felt a deep connection to Robin, sensing that this fragile little girl had something powerful to teach her. Sadly, their time together was heartbreakingly short. Robin suffered from health complications, and just before her 2nd birthday, she passed away. The loss shattered Dale. She had already endured abandonment, divorce, and secrecy in her life, but losing Robin was unlike anything she had ever faced. For a while, she struggled with deep grief, but instead of letting sorrow consume her, she chose to use her pain to bring hope to others. Out of her heartbreak came a book titled Angel Unaware, published in 1953. Written as if told from Robin's perspective in heaven, the book spoke with tenderness and honesty about what it meant to love and lose a child with disabilities. At the time, this was a radical act. Celebrities almost never spoke openly about such topics, and the subject of disability was rarely discussed in public. Dale's book reframed the way many people thought about children like Robin. She presented her daughter's life as a gift and a blessing rather than a burden or shame. The book struck a chord with readers across the country and quickly became a bestseller. But the challenges for Dale and Roy's family did not end there. In 1964, tragedy struck again. Their adopted daughter Debbie was killed in a church bus accident when she was only 12 years old. What was supposed to be a joyful outing turned into a nightmare, and Dale was once again plunged into grief. To lose one child had been devastating. To lose another was almost unbearable. The pain was so great that the Rogers family eventually moved away from their home in Chatsworth, California. They relocated to Apple Valley, hoping that a new place might offer some relief from the memories that haunted them. Roy Rogers' secrets. For millions of fans across America, Roy Rogers was more than just a movie star. He was the king of the cowboys, the brave hero who always did the right thing, a man who seemed to live by honesty and strength. When paired with Dale Evans, he completed the picture of the perfect couple, wholesome, faithful, and devoted both on-screen and off. But what the public saw was not the whole truth. Behind the cowboy curtain, life was much more complicated. Roy's public image was carefully polished. On television and in films, he was always calm, kind, and approachable. He looked like the ideal husband and father, someone who never lost his temper and always put family first. In reality, Roy carried over a strict sense of order into his private life. He expected his children to follow rules closely, and he often enforced discipline in ways that felt harsh. Combined with his demanding work schedule, this strictness created strain within the family home. Roy was also relentless when it came to his career. Even after years of success in movies, radio, and television, he kept pushing himself to maintain the image that had made him famous. He took on public appearances, business ventures, and charity work, all while still keeping up with a demanding schedule in the entertainment industry. To his fans, it seemed as if he had endless energy, but at home his drive often meant he was absent, either physically away or mentally preoccupied. For Dale, this created a painful loneliness. She had built her life and career around her partnership with Roy, but behind closed doors, she often felt isolated. The world believed she was living out a fairy tale marriage, yet in her private moments she struggled with the reality of being married to a man who was emotionally distant and deeply absorbed in his work. She had longed for stability all her life, and while Roy gave her a sense of permanence she had not found before, the marriage was far from the picture-perfect love story their fans imagined. There was another secret that Dale only discovered late in life: Roy's hidden illness. Throughout his later years, Roy suffered from heart failure, a condition that gradually weakened him. But in keeping with his cowboy image, he rarely let on how serious it was. He kept the full extent of his health problems to himself, determined to maintain the strong, dependable persona that people expected. Dale was left in the dark, unaware of just how much he was suffering until his decline became impossible to hide. And once Roy was gone, Dale had to face the world alone, this time with only her faith and her voice to carry her forward. The last years. When Roy Rogers died in July of 1998, the world mourned the loss of one of its most beloved stars. For Dale Evans, however, the grief went far deeper than public ceremony. She had lost not just a partner on screen, but the man who had defined much of her adult life. Their marriage had been complicated, filled with secrets, strain, and sorrow. But it had also given her stability, children, and a shared mission of faith. His absence left her hollow, and in her final years, Dale carried both deep mourning and a quiet reckoning with her past. The shock of Roy's death also stirred something more than emotional pain. Not long after, Dale began to suffer from the same health condition that had taken him, congestive heart failure. Her body, like her spirit, seemed worn down after years of pressure, loss, and carrying the heavy weight of her public and private life. Even as she weakened, she tried to remain present for her family and her supporters, but those close to her could see how fragile she had become. In the 1990s, despite her declining health, Dale continued to make television appearances. But these were not the glamorous roles of her early career, nor even the cheery variety shows she had once shared with Roy. Instead, she spoke directly about grief, loss, and faith. Her audience had shifted over the years. Now she was speaking to widows, to parents who had buried their children, and to people who felt broken by life and unsure how to keep going. She used her own story, the losses of Robin and Debbie, the loneliness in her marriage, and the grief of Roy's death to connect with those who needed comfort. She wanted people to know they were not alone. On February 7, 2001, Dale Evans passed away at the age of 88 from congestive heart failure. She was buried beside Roy in Apple Valley, California, where the two had built their final home together. The site quickly became a place of pilgrimage for fans who had grown up watching them on screen, a reminder of the cowboy and cowgirl who had once symbolized American innocence and faith. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon so you don't miss the next one.